Hey everybody and welcome. Today I'm doing a mini make. This is a fabric head form for primarily working on hats or hair pieces or such similar things. The pattern is from Lynn McMaster's. I will link it below. It is meant to be printed out on legal size paper, which is 8.5 by 14, but I don't have any at the moment, so what I did was print it on 8.5 by 11 with an overlap, and then I just taped it together as you saw. This pattern only has two pieces. There is the long skinny part, which is the center of the head form, and then the shaped side pieces. I also opted to print this out at 104% as mentioned on the pattern itself to get a 23-inch head size. My head is 22.5 inches, but a little extra room never hurt anything. This also compensates slightly for hair and any other styling I have if I'm working on hat things. So all of these pieces need to be cut on the bias, and the fabric I am using is some pinkish twill that I have in the stash. I was lazy and I did not iron it beforehand, so there is a little wrinkle in the twill towards one end of the center pieces, but I will iron it before I start sewing. The notch points on the pattern are marked on the sewing line. Here I'm just moving them to the outer cutting edge just to make it easier when I go to pin it together to make sure the pieces line up properly. The pattern calls for a base made out of either a thin piece of wood or a couple layers of cardboard. I have a lot of packages from having a bad habit of keeping boxes after I receive things in the mail. So it meant I had a whole bunch of spare cardboard on hand that I just traced 3 circles out and then just cut them out with my X-Acto knife. Nice and easy. Nothing fancy. To keep my cardboard layers together, I used some PVA glue that I had on hand. Just smushed a little about and put them together like an ice cream sandwich, offsetting the ridges in the cardboard slightly, and then I used a little bit of masking tape just to keep them together while the glue dried. Before I started sewing, I did press out that little bump I had in the twill on the one side. I did make I don't want to say it was a mistake because it didn't really damage anything, but I didn't check the directions before I started sewing, and I did sew my center seam first. It would have been easier if I had sewn the side seams first and then joined at the center, but it all worked out in the end, so I'm not that worried about it. I did pin and sew one side at a time when I did this though. First I matched my notches, then my ends, and then I pinned the spaces in between to match. For the most curved part along the top of the head form, I did cut some notches partway into my seam allowance to help the straight center part of the head form stretch around the curved part of the side seam, of the side panel I should say. I did make sure to only cut about halfway into my seam allowance, and the fact that it was on the bias did also help with easing around that curve. And I did the exact same thing for the other side afterwards. Once I finished sewing, I did notch along the center seam at the top just to make sure it wouldn't pull once I turned it. Could I have pressed all of my seams? Yes. Did I? No. Honestly, I don't think it made a big deal. Next step was to just shove a ton of stuffing into the turned head form. And you can see me pushing on it, making sure it felt firm enough. And I found a stuffing stick in the middle of my stuffing at the same time, which I didn't even know was there. And I put my chopstick back in. So once I felt I had enough stuffing in it, I put the base in, and then I just took a very long piece of thread and kind of did very long stitches over the bottom to keep the base in and to help secure that. I probably should have cut my thread just a little bit longer, but it's not the end of the world. A quick check to make sure it was standing, and then I took an extra piece of twill and cut out a circle larger than the base, and then I just tucked it under and pinned it to cover the bottom. And then again with some thread, I just very quickly whip stitched it in place to give me a smoother finish on the bottom. And once that's finished, then the head form is all done. This only took me about an hour and 15 minutes or so to do, so it was a very quick project. It looks kind of weird when it doesn't have anything on it, but you know, toss a cap on it and hey, it's kind of cute. I hope you enjoyed my mini make. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing to see other stuff I will be putting out in the future. Thanks again. Bye.